when you look at decisions made at state level or local level, the Chinese regime and the ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, released a report, and they talked about this. They said that the Chinese are doubling down on their efforts to exert influence through a variety of means. Environmental groups, encouraging litigation, right, against mining operations or whatever it may be. Social influencers to try to get a message out, right, that influences local and state regulators to do things such as saying, no, got to keep it in the ground. No, we don't want phosphate mining, as an example. And that serves the purpose. Whether an environmental group or whether a group that's out there that focuses on these things and files lawsuits constantly for environmental purposes, and then, by the way, those lawyers, usually recoup their funds from, what is called the Endangered Species Act that allows them to get their money back. So you think, oh, wow, these lawyers are fighting and it's pro bono. No, it's not. They're getting paid. So, but they're doing it, whether they do it knowingly or whether they do it unwittingly, it still serves the purpose of the Chinese regime, which is looking to say, keep it in the ground because we want to control all of this. And again, whether it's cobalt, whether it's lithium, whether it's phosphate, whatever it may be, it's a fascinating thing. But the point being that we can't pursue a green future and at the same time overregulate the mining process. And it just doesn't work.
China has so much influence on America. It's crazy how different the playing field is between like what we're allowed to do. Like Americans can't own businesses in China. They can't own land in China. They can't buy property. But China can do all those things here. And they can influence our universities. They bring their students over here. Their students siphon up data and information and oftentimes get caught. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Possibly, yeah.
They get caught, right?
Yeah.
There's been quite a few of those cases.
There have been, but you think about that's the tip of the iceberg, right? That's a small number that, because it's an incredibly heavy lift, right? A counterintelligence operation is really tough, and so I look at that and I think, thank God we caught that person. But then you think, well, how many more are there out there?
Right. So that's the thing. It's like how many of them are just more careful?
Yeah. It is interesting in a way. We used to talk about it when we were on the war on terror, right? And everybody's forgotten about that, for the most part. Although we probably should talk a little bit about.
It's on the back burner.
Yeah, it's bubbling away in Afghanistan, which we should also talk about. But we used to talk about war on terror and how the terrorists were using our open society against us, right?
Right.
And the Chinese regime does the same thing, right? They understand and they look at how we operate and they say, okay, where's the weaknesses, right? Where are the leverage points that we can use to turn that against them? And this idea. Look, China produces more carbon than all the developed nations combined,
which is very important to talk about when people are talking about going green. Because the amount of impact that would happen, even if the United States went to zero carbon output, you're not going to put a dent in what's happening to the world. Because most of it is coming from China and India.
India, right?
Yeah,
right.
That's most of it. So all this shit about don't eat meat because we're going to save the world, you're not saving jack shit.
No.
And I don't understand where that message is coming from or why there's not a nuanced perspective where people are taking into account all these other variables.
Well, in part, again,
it doesn't fit the narrative.
It doesn't fit the narrative, but also there is this effort. Look, I mean, we talked. You remember the what was that called? Internet Research Agency, right?
Yeah.
It was, and so the potential for influence on the elections, right? Back in the day, which wasn't that long ago, and the Chinese regime actually does it better than the Russians, right? They've got way more resources. They've got a much longer view. Frankly, they're more sophisticated, right? And so sometimes you look at things and you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why are we, acting in this way? And then you think, well, because you've got like a local or a grassroots community activist group, right? And they're not Chinese spies. They're not working, but they're the Chinese regime identifies them and says, you know what, if we can influence them, this is just pure, propaganda or covert action campaign. If I can influence that activist group to go out and tell those whomever, the city officials or the county commissioners or whatever, that this is bad, right? And this is, we need to stop this, right? We shouldn't be mining for lithium in Nevada or wherever. We shouldn't be pursuing, logical steps to get, control over the critical mineral supply chain issue, right? Why wouldn't you do that, right? It's smart activity on the part of the Chinese regime and the intel service there. So that part of it, to me, makes sense. The problem we have is that there's a lack of awareness, right? Now, there was again, it shows you I've been spending too much time reading on this shit, but I'm fascinated by this idea that we're trying to do two things that are completely opposed to each other. Stop fossil fuels and also keep critical minerals in the ground that we're going to need to pursue green energy. That part is amazing, but I did actually write down. Well,
but that is part of the problem with green energy, is that it's not really green, because you do have to mine. And when you do mine, there is consequences. There's
consequences, and that's. But as you pointed out, look, we mine cleaner and safer than anybody else, and that's why there was I'm gonna actually read a quote. This shows you. Look, see, I feel like I'm maturing. I've gotten more organized.
You're so prepared, Mike. I'm so proud of you.
I know. Look, this. See, I know. There have been times when you've been staring at me, thinking, "Where the fuck is he talking about?" Or is he going? Is he taking a nap? So they had a hearing in Arizona not too long ago about critical minerals, the issue of critical minerals, and the importance of them, and the importance of speeding up the permitting process. If we want to pursue a green future, you got to do it. And this guy, Congressman, I know I've got a note here, Paul Gosar, from wherever, Arizona, said, and this is a quote, "The anti-mining actions by the Biden administration hurt America's economy, threaten our national security, and push mineral production abroad, where environmental and labor standards pale in comparison with our own," right? And that's absolutely correct. And again, all you have to do is look at what goes on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's insane, but I don't see that we're going to walk that back, right? Because there's too much pushback, and no matter what mineral you're talking about, I don't see that necessarily changing unless you get maybe a change in administration, and then you get the effort to deregulate, and then you speed up permitting. But at some point, we're going to be screwed.